The Christmas Rescue. The snow fell thick and silent over the streets of Portland as Marcus Chen guided his black SUV carefully through the winter storm. Christmas lights blurred behind the curtain of wet flakes, and the windshield wipers worked overtime to keep his view clear. Marcus loosened his tie with one hand, exhausted after another 16-hour day at Chen Industries. As CEO of the tech company his father had built, he carried responsibilities that seemed to grow heavier each year. But tonight, all he wanted was to get home to his daughter. 7-year-old Lily would be waiting with Mrs. Patterson, their housekeeper, probably already in her pajamas and fighting sleep. Marcus smiled at the thought. Being a single father wasn't easy, but Lily made every sacrifice worth it. The storm had emptied the roads. Most people had the good sense to stay inside on a night like this. Marcus slowed at an intersection, squinting through the snow, when something caught his eye. A figure stood on the sidewalk ahead, hunched against the wind. As he drew closer, his headlights revealed a young woman in a thin blue coat, holding not one but two small bundles against her chest. She was crying, her face red from cold and tears, swaying slightly as if she might collapse at any moment. Marcus' heart clenched. Without thinking, he pulled over and lowered his window. "Miss, are you all right?" The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and snowflakes clung to her blonde hair. She tried to speak, but only a sob came out. One of the bundles in her arms began to cry, then the other joined in, two tiny, wailing voices cutting through the howling wind. Marcus didn't hesitate. He threw the SUV into park and jumped out, the cold hitting him like a wall. "Please," he said gently, "you need to get out of this storm. Let me help you." The woman stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust this stranger. Then another violent shiver ran through her, and she nodded weakly. Marcus opened the back door and helped her inside. The warmth of the car seemed to hit her all at once, and she slumped against the seat, still clutching the two babies. They couldn't have been more than a few months old, wrapped in thin blankets that were already damp from the snow. "I'm Marcus," he said, sliding back into the driver's seat and turning up the heat. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Mitchell." "Sarah, I'm taking you somewhere warm and safe. Is there anyone I can call for you?" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "There's no one. He lost everything." Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Something about the emptiness in her voice told him this wasn't an exaggeration. He'd seen enough in his years running a business, and enough in his own life after his wife left, to recognize true desperation. "It's okay," he said quietly. "One step at a time." He drove carefully through the storm, his mind racing. Taking a stranger and her babies to his home wasn't exactly protocol, but he couldn't bear the thought of dropping them at a shelter on Christmas Eve. Besides, Mrs. Patterson was still there, and his house had more than enough space. "Are the babies okay?" he asked, watching Sarah try to warm the infants with her own body heat. "They're cold," she said, her voice cracking. "Everything happened so fast. The apartment fire was 3 days ago. We've been staying in my car, but it broke down this afternoon. He had enough money for diapers and formula, but not for a tow truck and repairs. He was trying to walk to the shelter when..." She broke off, unable to continue. Marcus' jaw tightened. A fire, a broken car, 2 babies, and nowhere to go. The universe had dealt this woman a cruel hand right before the holidays. 20 minutes later, they pulled into Marcus's driveway. The house, a sprawling craftsman with warm lights glowing in every window, looked like something from a Christmas card. Sarah stared at it with wide eyes. "I can't, this is too much," she started to say. "You can, and it's not," Marcus said firmly but kindly. "Come on. Let's get you and the twins inside." Mrs. Patterson met them at the door, her motherly instincts kicking in immediately. Within minutes, Sarah was wrapped in a warm robe, the twins were being fed bottles of formula, and Lily had come downstairs in her pajamas, eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, who are they?" she asked, peering at the babies. "This is Miss Sarah, and her babies Emma and Ethan," Marcus explained, realizing he'd learned the twins' names during the drive. "They're going to stay with us for a little while." Lily's face lit up. Like a Christmas miracle? Marcus met Sarah's eyes over his daughter's head. The young woman's expression had transformed from despair to something like hope, fragile and new. "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus said softly. "Exactly like that." Over the next few days, Sarah's story emerged in pieces. She was a nurse at Portland General, working double shifts to support her twins after their father left during her pregnancy. The apartment fire had destroyed everything: photos, documents, the few precious belongings she'd managed to accumulate. Her family was on the East Coast, estranged after she'd chosen to keep the babies against their wishes. She'd been alone, fighting to survive, until a snowstorm and a stranger's kindness changed everything. Marcus found himself drawn to her quiet strength, the way she held herself together even when everything had fallen apart. She reminded him of his own struggles after his wife abandoned him, how he'd learned to be both mother and father to Lily. They talked late into the evenings, after the children were asleep. Sarah shared stories of her patients at the hospital, the small moments of grace that kept her going through the hardest shifts. Marcus opened up about the loneliness of his position, how success sometimes felt empty without someone to share it with. "You saved my life," Sarah said one night, her voice soft in the quiet living room. "I don't just mean from the storm. Man, you gave me hope when I had none left." Marcus shook his head. "You saved yourself. You were out there in that snowstorm, still fighting, still protecting your babies. That takes incredible courage." "I didn't feel very courageous. The bravest people rarely do." New Year's came and went. Marcus helped Sarah find a new apartment, then stopped himself. Why was he pushing her to leave? The house felt more alive with her laughter, with the twins, babbling, with someone who understood what it meant to rebuild a life from ashes. "Stay," he said finally, the word hanging between them. "Not as a guest. As family." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were different from those he'd first seen in the snowstorm. They were tears of joy. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Marcus thought of Lily's happiness, of how the twins had brought new energy to their home, of how Sarah's presence had filled spaces in his heart he didn't know were empty. "I've never been more sure of anything," he said. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, soft and gentle in the lamplight. But inside, the house was warm, filled with the sound of children's laughter and the promise of new beginnings. Sometimes salvation comes not in grand gestures but in simple moments: a car stopping in a storm, a door opening, a hand reaching out. And sometimes, when you save someone else, you discover they've saved you too. The storm had passed, but what it left behind was something far more precious than Marcus had ever imagined: a family, complete at last.